In this episode, we'll show you how we made this snake challenge from Survivor.
In case you haven't seen this game before, the object is to move the ball up along the body of the snake and into the hole in its head. And to do that, you have this curved wooden beam that you control with a rope on either end, and you can do this with one person or with two to make it an extra challenge.
Oh!
You can also add a balance beam, which adds a whole other dimension to this game. So I'll show you how we made it. We're going to start this build with the easel, and to give you an idea of what it looks like, here it is completed. To make these two identical sides, these are the lengths of 2x2 boards that you'll want to cut. So there'll be 4 for the legs, 2 for the outer top pieces, 2 for the bottom pieces, and 2 for the inner top pieces. And for the size game we're making at least, you'll want one piece of 1/2-inch plywood cut to 36 by 48 inches. After cutting all the wood, we're just arranging all the pieces into the two sides of the easel. Before screwing this together, I'd recommend measuring out the location of each screw and drilling a through hole through one of the pieces of wood. This will allow the screw to pass cleanly through this board while digging into the next board and really pulling them together. And here's that same screw hole on the other side. To connect this inner top piece, we need to drill holes through the sides of the legs that are just a little bit lower than center, so that those two holes for the screws don't intersect. For the lower horizontal piece, I'm just measuring 18 inches up from the bottom of the leg and another 3/4 inch up to see where the center is and thus where the through hole will go. And I'm adding these lines just so I can see when I'm lining up this horizontal piece if it's lined up right. And once again, drilling some through holes that are just a little bit bigger than the screws we're using. To make these align as well as possible, I'm clamping these pieces together and then using a smaller drill bit than I used previously to make a pilot hole for the screw. That way we lessen the chance of it splitting the wood. Then we drive a screw into either end and release the clamps. Now I'm centering this piece in the middle of the long top piece, so 2.5 inches are sticking out from each end, and using those holes we pre-drilled, I drive a screw into each. So here I've marked on the side of the vertical pieces where this one needs to be. And so I'm lining that up. And we already have the through hole for the screw. And that's our two frames. I should have used this wood to space that. Phew! And at this point, you'll probably notice that the easel isn't staying square, but once you secure this piece of plywood to it with a few screws, it'll hold its shape really well.
It does look like we're making an easel.
All right, so just arbitrarily, we've set these hinges in 4 inches from the edge, and I'm hinging it down like that to figure out where to put it. And so you can see there are gonna be 3 screws there, and I'm just gonna get a little pilot hole started for each. And then we have the 3 screws.
Now we're lining these up head to head there so we can align the hinges.
And just as we did before, we'll drill pilot holes and put in the screws. On both sides, of course. And now we can see our easel has really taken shape.
So it folds up like that and kicks out. Boom!
So there's our easel setup, and of course you may want to have a rope or a chain between these legs to make sure that it doesn't just flop out and fall down.
I'm just measuring halfway in from the end here where we're going to put the eye hook. We'll drill a pilot hole in there. These are the eye hooks we'll use. Probably could have made those even a little bit bigger.
Then just screw in the eye hook by hand, and near the end you may find you need to use the tool to get some leverage. And in case you're wondering why we have this second piece of wood at the top at all, here was our thinking. For this top frame, we have a couple ways we could do it. We can have it be on the front of the leg pieces, or we could have it on top of the leg pieces. An argument for having it on the front is that wherever these eye hooks are, the string will always be parallel with the surface of the game board or the snake. Whereas if we had the board on top and the eye hook going down, the string would actually make an angle with the game surface and potentially snag on the side. So that's why in the moment we decided to have this second top board. But really, you probably could just have one piece on the top and have the eye hook pointing out, and the string would still be parallel to the surface.
So I'm just gonna start to draw a border around the edge, and then the snake pattern will be inside of it.
And that 2x4 gives us a 3.5-inch border.
All right, here we're just gonna draw a center line.
So we thought we might be able to use an extension cord to try and shape the snake, but this extension cord has kind of a shape memory of its own, so I don't think we can make the nice curves of the snake. So instead, we're using a garden hose because it has a nice thickness and keeps a nice curve. And with a few pairs of hands, we were able to hold the shape we wanted on the board while Tom traced it out with a pencil. To give the curves of the snake some thickness, we made this little jig out of wood to hold 2 pencils 2 3/4 inches apart, which we thought was a good width for the snake given the size of the game board, and then that we were imagining using a golf ball. In the middle, we drilled another hole so we can try and keep the center line of the snake we already drew in view. Then we followed that line around with the jig to draw both sides of the snake at the same time.
This looks fantastic.
Next, Tom penciled in the head of the snake using a small flower pot and added an inner circle to represent the hole in the head of the snake where you want to try and get the ball. To make sure we follow the correct lines when we're using the jigsaw, Tom traced it out with a Sharpie, and he found it easiest to make nice smooth lines when he's pulling the pen towards himself. And with all the main lines traced, we're thinking that snake looks pretty darn cool.
That looks really cool, actually.
To prepare to cut out the snake, we drilled a few holes around the board so that we could fit in the blade of the jigsaw.
This is going to be satisfying.
And began following the lines. Anytime a section was about to drop out, we made sure to support it with our hands so the cut would remain nice and clean. And this 1/2-inch plywood seemed kind of thin at times, but in the end, especially with the head touching the top, it seems plenty stable. And how good does that look?
We got a 2-inch hole saw, and we'll put that right in the middle of the snake's head.
And that is just big enough for a golf ball, which is about 1.7 inches in diameter. And with this hole, just make sure not to put it so high that you can't actually get the ball into it with the rocker. And there's the snake on the easel, so we can mark out some screw holes so we can secure it to the easel with 3 countersunk screws on each side. To make a nice smooth arc for the rocker, we use some paracord and a pencil to trace out an arc with about a 6-foot radius. Then we use the 2-inch hole saw to trace out some bumps on either end of the rocker to help catch the ball, and the centers of these bumps are the same distance apart as the eye hooks on the easel. To keep a clean edge on our remaining plywood, we made a straight cut to separate the portion which had the outline of our rocker on it, then used a jigsaw to carefully follow our lines. After a few minutes of that, we had the first piece of our rocker.
Boom.
The 1/2-inch plywood is then thick enough to support a golf ball, so we cut off another piece of plywood, traced our first piece onto it, and then roughly cut it out with a jigsaw.
So on this one, he's left a little bit extra because we're going to use the router to clean that up.
Then we drilled some number 10 countersink holes into it, spread some glue on it,
I don't think I've ever seen it spread by glove.
and then secured the 2 pieces together with some number 10 by 3/4 inch screws. And before using the router, we wipe off the excess glue with the damp rag.
So we have the router depth so that that bearing rolls across the bottom piece of plywood, and then this bit will trim off the rest to match the bottom piece.
And if you don't have a router, this game isn't so precise that you couldn't just make this rocker using a jigsaw, cutting all the pieces.
That's very satisfying. And now we have our 2 matching pieces for our, I keep forgetting what we call this.
Rocker.
The rocker. Our new way to pull the ball up.
We only made this 2 layers thick, but I highly recommend to make it 3 because it's just not wide enough for the golf ball. And in fact, Tom added a little bit more wood on the back to make it thick enough to support a ball.
So we decided we're going to put these eye hooks in this like this. So I'm going to just drill some pilot holes. All right, for handles, we're going to use this dowel, and we'll make it, 5 or 6 inches long, and then the string will actually go through the middle of the dowel between your fingers.
And for the line, we're just using some paracord, and anytime you cut it, you'll want to melt the end with a lighter. And here the rocker is just an extra piece of the 2x2 board that we used for some testing before we made our curved rocker. Before starting to paint it, Tom and Alice sanded it down a bit to knock down any rough edges. Then they applied a solid layer of yellow spray paint to the border and smoothed out any runs or bubbles with a foam brush. Then they did the same thing with green spray paint on the snake, and with black spray paint on the easel. And here's where my sister Alice really made this snake come to life. With incredible patience and artistry, she decorated this dot by dot and really made this something special. After painting the head, she worked down the body of the snake one color at a time, applying those dots and filling it in more and more with each color. And I'm still so impressed with this. And after hours of painstaking painting and coating it with polyurethane, the final result speaks for itself. And we've been experimenting with a variety of different balls. This is a light plastic one. The golf ball seems like the most logical choice. And then this is a bouncy ball. And they all behave quite differently. And cleverly, they put some felt back here to make it slide more smoothly. And finally, they hung some weights on the back of the easel to help keep it steady. This game was a lot of fun. Without some kind of backing to catch the ball, it was really handy to have someone willing to stand behind it and reset the ball each time you drop it. Because you'll probably drop the ball about 100 times in the first bend or two of the snake, but finally it'll click and you'll be able to steer that ball right up to the head of the snake.
So if you like videos like this, you might like this one here.
Did you glue the ball onto the thing? Okay.
That's funny.
Ah! Whoa! Oh! Oh!
And that's how you do it on Survivor.